Chadwick, let's go to you. Your Toronto Maple Leafs, always a fun topic, and they're 10-6-3 out of the gate through 19 games as well. 5-3-2 in their last 10, but I couldn't believe this when Steve Dangle tweeted out 5 wins in their last 19 or whatever.
In regulation
5 regulation
wins.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been it's been kind of up and down a little bit for the Leafs to start, but only 2 points behind Detroit and Tampa Bay for third and fourth in the Atlantic. So let's get into your Maple Leafs.
Yeah, well, they're 10-6-3, so that's a .605 points percentage. They're second, like in the second wildcard spot right now. And you start to look at the Atlantic, man, and it's kind of scary. Like, there were lots of points up for grabs to start the season through the first 20 games or so. Like Florida didn't have Ekblad or Montour. Both those guys are back. Tampa didn't have Vasilevsky. Well, he's back now. Both of those teams are ahead of Toronto, plus Boston, another team who we thought was going to fall off and hasn't. Those were points that could have been up for grabs for the Leafs too. So really, like, after a pretty sluggish start to the season through 20 some odd games, they don't look great. But I can't say that, I expected them to be a top 3 team in the league. Like, you look at the numbers and it kind of makes sense based on what we expected going into the season. We knew that the defense was going to be worse. The only thing is we thought the offense would be better. And right now it just hasn't been. And I think that's a product of the first line not being very good with Matthews and Marner and Matthew Knies there. That's been switched up now. So now Matthews will be playing with Nylander, who's been incredible, and Matthew Knies. So maybe that will give a boost to the offense. But when I was looking at the numbers, I was like shocked, but also not shocked that they were 17th in expected goals for. This is a team that's consistently in the top 5 in the Matthews era. So that's pretty shocking. And then in expected goals against, I was not shocked to see that they are smack dab in the middle of the pack, 16th, giving up a lot of chances per game. Like, it hasn't been good. I said at the start of the season, they're probably going to give up more than we're used to. And that has exactly been the case. It's been because of a guy like John Klingberg, who hasn't been good enough, players up front like Ryan Reeves, who haven't been good enough, lacking a true third line center like a Ryan O'Reilly in the past, and just defensively capable bottom 6 forwards, Nola Chari, Pierre Engvall, Alex Kerfoot, guys like that who aren't in the lineup anymore. It's kind of showing for the Leafs. So I don't think the sky's falling in Toronto, but the team as it is right now, the numbers back this up too, just isn't good enough. But it's also not that surprising given how the roster was constructed heading into the season.
Yeah, and not to mention they dropped a few games early in the season when Samsonov was struggling. Well, they found the answer in that, and that's Joseph Woll. He's been great since he's come in. At least, statistically, he's been really good. There was a couple games at the beginning where I didn't think that they had a goalie to play, but he's been great. So they have an answer to that. It's consistency that this team really lacks. It seems like, when they're winning big, and when they're losing, it's, it looks rough. And that's the case in the top 2 players on this team. Who are supposed to be the top 2 players. Now Nylander's a GOAT for some reason. But Matthews and Marner, going 6 games where the 2 of them don't have a single point in the game. Like, that's unheard of with those guys. It's insane. 6 of Matthews' goals in the first 2 games, and he has 13. So, those guys are either hot or they're absent. And that's what's hurting this team, I think. It's just lacking consistency, and and it's resulting in all of the metrics being mid. Just absolute middle of the road of every single metric. That's what I had in my notes. I just quickly looked at these guys on Money Puck before we hopped on, and I was like, it's like 50-50, 50-50, 50-50, right in the middle of the road, 18th, 17th in the league on every statistic. It's except for too many men penalties. Yeah,
where they're number 1, and they have been for the last few years.
Yeah.
So But yeah,
Jeez.
it's not like, like if I were to say to you that I don't expect the offense to get better, I would be lying because, talking about consistency, Marner and Matthews over the past few years have been absolute models of consistency. Like Matthews almost scored 50 goals in 50 games the one year that he scored 60, almost did that. Marner had set a Maple Leafs record for most consecutive games with a point, and that was either last year or a couple years ago now. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the point is, these guys have been incredibly consistent through their entire tenures as Leafs. I think, and I was kind of thinking about this. I think the problem is that they don't have a defensive line that they can play against other teams' top lines. So they're getting the toughest matchups at all times, and not only in the offensive end, but in the defensive end too. Like I haven't looked at the start numbers. I think they're still starting quite a bit in the offensive end, but it just seems like they almost never have the puck compared to how often they usually do. So I don't know what's going on. I think like in the past, Sheldon Keefe would use a defensive third line with just fast like killers who would wear out other teams' top lines or second lines. And now they kind of just don't have the personnel to do that. And I feel like Marner and Matthews are suffering a bit because they are always tasked with shutting down the other team's top line. So to me, that's sort of what I have been seeing from it. It'll be interesting to see now what happens with Nylander playing with Matthews and Marner with Tavares, because you'd have to think that the Marner-Tavares line would be getting the defensive starts against the other team's top line, because you probably trust Marner more defensively, and Tavares, like you trust him more defensively than Nylander, I guess. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see going forward. I think they should have split up the top two lines way earlier in the season. You guys know, like I've always been an advocate for playing Nylander with Matthews. We haven't seen Nylander play this well and also play with Matthews, so that could be an absolute recipe for success for this team. But I don't know, man. Like they've got some real holes to fill, and now because of John Klingberg on LTIR, they actually might have some space to do it. So I'm excited to see what they do going forward, whether it's, a third line center or a stable top four defenseman. Whatever they do, like something is clearly going to happen. I don't know how soon, but definitely before the deadline. And whatever they do, I think should make this team better, because the personnel right now just honestly isn't good enough, which is, for the first time in a while, the Leafs don't look like a regular season juggernaut, which, my entire time watching Matthews and Marner, for the most part, except for maybe the first or second season, that's what they've looked like, an absolute regular season juggernaut. So it's a different team.
Something that you mentioned, mentioning the line matchups, that's something that had me confused, because I thought that Max Domi was going to flourish because of this, because you don't expect him to be out there as like the defensive line and playing against the other team's top lines. And you expect the top two lines to take, most of the attention of the defensive pairings from the other team. So you thought, I would have thought that Max Domi would have all this freedom to go out and score at will. But I mean, except for some assists, he hasn't really done that. And what do you think the answer, what do you think the problem is there?
Well, I'll tell you what the problem was. For the first 10 games of the season, Max Domi was playing the left wing and David Kampf was in the middle. And Kampf has not been good enough this season, not even close. Plus, he's a player that is an absolute black hole for offense. So after about 10 games or so, they moved Domi to the middle, called up Nick Robertson, and those two have been clicking like crazy, along with Calle Jarnkrok, who didn't move. He was in that third line right wing position the whole time. But that line has been actually pretty good recently, and I think the numbers are through, it's either 6 or 7 games now where they've played together, dating back to before the Sweden trip, and I think they've outscored opponents like 6-5 or something to that effect. So we knew that line was going to give up some some defensively, but we also know that they're also capable of scoring. Max Domi hasn't scored yet. You'd like to see the guy get a goal. You know, he has, I think, 11 assists through 19 games or whatever, but he's slowly starting to settle in. And you know what? I really like Max Domi now that he's playing in the middle. It seems like he can distribute the puck a lot better, and he's not, you know, stuck playing with David Kampf, who just creates absolutely nothing. That being said, Max Domi as a 3C playing with Nick Robertson on the wing, even though they can score, I already mentioned they give up quite a bit defensively. And if you think that like both of those guys are going to be on a line together game one of the playoffs, you're crazy, because they're not tough enough. They're not big enough. Like, it's just not an option. And I hate to sound like a boomer, but like those two on a third line together, it's not an option. You need another line that can shut down another team. Like I don't know. It just, they're irresponsible at times, and that just isn't playoff hockey. It's fun right now, and I like Nick Robertson and I like Max Domi, but I don't know if that's sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, according to all the boomers, Ryan Reeves was the answer, but now you have a 3-year contract in the press box.
That guy stinks, man. I don't know. I think priority number one is to replace Klingberg with a stable two-way defenseman. Like I've told you guys, my dream defenseman would be Noah Hannafin. I think it makes so much sense. Re-sign him, give him, you know, a little bit less than Morgan Riley, and then you have two horses for the foreseeable future on the back end. Both on the left side, that's fine. You've got two great pairs for the next, 6 years. And by the way, Morgan Riley has been playing like incredibly this year. He has something like hold on, I have it written down here somewhere. He has 16 points in 19 games, and he is like, his pair of him and Brody get the toughest matchups every single night, but they've been handling it solidly this year. Morgan Riley has low key been maybe the second best Leaf this season. Like it goes Nylander number 1, Morgan Riley number 2, and then probably like Matthews or Tavares, and then it gets tricky after that. Obviously, we know Marner, like they need more out of Marner, but yeah, Morgan Riley has been low key good. But yeah, they need bodies. They need more effective players, and just right now, this team is so incomplete. It almost feels like wrong to come to a conclusion through 20 games or whatever, because this won't be the team that goes into the playoffs. Like Brad Treliving, like just can't be done. Like it's just not a finished product. No. And if it is, then it's not a good one.
Yeah. Just to go back to the top 6 and you know, the core 4, at least, it's the consistency that I mentioned before. When you look at these guys and you look at the fact that they're point per game players, but then you look at Matthews' last 5 games and he has 4 with no points. It's just they score multiple points a game and then they go quiet for a few. Now, a lot of wins in those last 5 games without any points by Matthews, but that just can't be. You need those guys being consistent each night and then support from the bottom 6. But when the top 6 is streaky minus Nylander and the bottom 6 is struggling, it's not going to work out. And, you know, it seems like they have a fix. McMahon's been great on that 4th line. He's been fun to watch, a little spark plug. And then Nyes is scoring, and Yarncroc, I thought you were going to say he's the second best player in the Leafs this year, because he's been
good. He's been
Swiss
good.
Army knife out there, scoring a decent amount of goals as well. So I don't know. It's funny to think that they've been playing 11-7 with a struggling back end, or at least one with holes in it. So it seems like this team has a lot to fix, but they're the highest in the standings of the 3 we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, and that's why I said off the bat that the sky isn't falling. You know, like the power play is 5th in the league. The penalty kill could use some work, but it's not like it's in the absolute basement. I mean, I guess it's 19th. It could be a lot better, but like some things are going right on this team, and I do expect the scoring to go up. You know, like Matthews and Marner aren't going to be quiet for the rest of the season. So I like, you want to talk about consistency. Nylander going 17 straight games to open the season.
Yeah, that's
with
what
a
you
point. That was incredible. And then JT as well, like he's been the model of consistency ever since he came to Toronto. Like he's about a point per game every single year and gets a point almost every game. Like it's, that second line has been incredible. And I will say too, someone we haven't mentioned is Tyler Bertuzzi. Start of the year, first 10 games, I was out. I didn't want to see him. He didn't look good. He looked slow, ugly, not the type of player they should have signed for 5.5. But over the past, 5-6 games, he started to settle in and he's started to look pretty damn good playing on that second line with Nylander and Tavares. So I think the longer this team sort of takes and starts to settle in, I think the forwards anyway will get better. Another guy like David Kampf isn't going to be as bad as he's been this season for the rest of the season. I think he'll eventually figure it out once they figure out a line that can defend if he wants to be a part of that. But I don't know, man. Like I said, this team isn't complete, so it just feels odd to come to conclusions because they've got now about $4 million to spend, and they're certainly going to.
Yeah, when talking about the Buds, like, I heard someone say this the other day. I forget who it was, but obviously everyone out there is saying that, for the Maple Leafs, the playoffs is the only thing that matters. The regular season doesn't matter. And you just hope that doesn't like creep into that locker room and that, we just need to, it doesn't matter. We just need to get to the playoffs kind of thing. And that is true to a certain extent, but you're certainly looking for more consistency in all three positions with this lineup. I mean, the goaltending, Samsonov started off really poorly, and then Joseph Woll, who looks like the future in net for them, started off tremendously, and he's been a little up and down lately. Then on the back end, obviously, not really sure what Tree Living was thinking with the John Klingberg experiment there. But look, I mean, we know Tree Living and his track record. I think a move for a defenseman is coming at some point, and it may be for a defenseman off of the Calgary Flames. And then up front, you can really see how Marner is fighting it right now. And I would be more concerned about him, between him and Matthews, because when Marner is struggling, you can really see it. You can really see how it kind of wears on him. And so that is something that he'll continue to have to shake. But I think as the season goes along, those two guys are just so good that, they'll get going again. But Case is right. Like they'll have a big night where they put up 3 or 4 points, or Matthews has a hat trick or whatever. Then they kind of disappear for a few games. But man, like I've been all over William Nylander the past couple of years, but he has been absolutely fantastic. Like he drives them offensively every single night. He's been doing it, and he's been making things happen every night, and they have no choice but to pay him after this year and keep him around. I mean, that deal is going to be massive now. I think the ship has sailed on the 8.5 to 9 million or whatever, but he's been fantastic, and I'm really happy for Nick Robertson as well, because he's had a couple of tough years, and he is a good goal scorer and kind of too good for the American Hockey League at this point, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So to see him come in and contribute, and look, like Domi is starting to get going now. You'd like to see him get his first goal, but he's been contributing. Bertuzzi was probably their best player the other night in that loss to Pittsburgh as well. So, obviously still early. It's taken some time for some guys to get acclimated here, and certainly don't like how we're kind of back to this team under Kyle Dubas a couple of years ago, where the bottom 6, we were a little unsure about it and some of the roles. It looked good early on, obviously, when they took Reeves out of the lineup, and they've found some guys in Noah Gregor, for example, and whatever. So they'll have to figure that out. But I mean, this team is going to be fine, and it's looking very likely in this Atlantic Division that it's going to shake out that, that usual quartet of Boston, Florida, Tampa, Toronto. They're going to be the four teams that get in the Atlantic. Detroit looks like the only one that could disrupt that right now. But yeah, not too worried about the Leafs moving forward. Just the consistency needs to improve a little bit. But we know Brad Treliving, he is one of those GMs who always asks whenever someone becomes available, he's in on it. They definitely talked to Patrick Kane or explored that or whatever. Obviously not what they need. And I think we know that a move for a defenseman is coming at some point with Klingberg now on LTIR. So yeah, not too concerned with the Leafs as the year goes moving forward.
You mentioned, the fact that he might be trading for a Calgary defenseman. And Chad, you said that Noah Hanifin was your dream defenseman for that situation. That's not what you said to us. You said he was dreamy.
Dreaming or dreamy?
Yeah, you said Noah Hanifin's dreamy. I want him on the team.
Is that how I phrased it?
Yeah, just want
that's what you said.
Want all the good-looking guys on the
pretty
team.
Weird.
I just want to see him wear what Nylander wore on that Swedish talk show where he was being groped by that 70-year-old woman. Did you guys see that clip?
Yes.
She was like grabbing his muscles and stuff and said she called him like a groovy man or something. Anyway.
And then, so is this team going to play with 6 forwards and 4D next year when they have to pay Willie? Or what's the plan here?
I mean, listen, I feel like this topic could be an entire episode. So I'll give you the Cliff Notes. If you give him a $4 million raise, okay, he makes 7. That would put him to 11. That's more than you want to give him. That's more than he's probably going to get. If say he gets 10.5, okay, you basically just use John Klingberg's money to pay Willie when the cap goes up. Not that big of a deal. Then I guess you could say, okay, now they have 4 forwards who make more than $10 million. Well, JT has 1 year left after this one. He'll go down, essentially swap contracts with Nylander if they want to keep him. He'll be making, the Kopitar money, the 7 times 3 or 4 or whatever Kopitar got.
Yeah.
And, maybe a little bit more because the cap will be up. But I don't see it being a problem if you are committed to keeping everyone together. The bigger question is that the right decision? I think they could definitely do it and still ice a very good team, possibly even another top 5 team, depending who they fill out the team, or depending who fills out the team around those guys. But I just don't know if that is the right option if they lose again early in the playoffs.
Yeah, my comment was less let's get into the plan here and more Willie Nylander now is pushing himself into a $11 million category, just the way he's playing. So,
and I'll say this, like, you guys know I've been the biggest Nylander supporter forever, right? Like during the contract dispute, so many people were saying that it was going to be an overpay. And I am for sure on record at the time saying that he will outperform this contract. It's a good deal. He's a great player, blah, blah, blah. Didn't look so good in the first half season that he came back and stunk. But, he's been really great ever since. And I've been sort of pumping his tires from day one. But I have to say, I knew he was good. I didn't know he was drive a line on one of the best teams in hockey every single night good. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I knew he was special, but I didn't know that he was, putting himself in the conversation of top 10 players in the league special. Because honestly, like through 20 games, that's the conversation. Like, that's where he is. It's not like he's getting a bunch of secondary assists, he's getting primary points. He's scoring goals. He's essentially putting the team on his back a lot of nights. The days of people comparing or criticizing him of being a perimeter player, long gone. He scores more goals from the house than so many really good players. Like, he gets to the tough areas. He wins battles. He's like 210 pounds. You know, not that he throws his body around, but he wins puck battles all the time.
Chat, you and I both know his head weighs 30 pounds.
Yeah, the flow adds an extra 10. But point is, I knew that Willie was good. I didn't know that he was great, and he's been great this year.
Ditto. Yeah, I did not see this. Well, actually, I think we kind of did because it's a contract year.
Well, yeah, that's scary, isn't it?
Yeah, geez. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I got to give it to him for not having a care in the world either. Like just going out there and playing. And so anyway, credit to him. But yes, it is a contract year, so it's not a surprise. But anyway,